Well, I decided to make a video here today showing you what settings that I use on my PlayStation 4 after using Goldhin since it basically first came out. So, this is obviously going to be very helpful for those that are just coming in from the 11.0 jailbreak, but could also be helpful to those that maybe haven't played with the settings as much. Okay, so right here is my PlayStation 4, obviously, and I have Goldhin running. Now, it has been reset to the stock settings, so yours will look exactly like mine. So let's go into Goldhin first, and let's go into debug settings. And the very first option you're going to see is called Package Installer. Now, you can get to this a number of different ways, but this is maybe one of the more direct ways to get to it. Now, you'll look down here and you'll see that the package source says USB, but if you press X on it, you can see that you can also install PKGs from the hard disk drive in the hard disk drive on /data/PKG. And there's another option that just gives you the option to do both. I always believe that the option you would want here would be all, where you could either have a USB inserted or just put them inside of that folder. So with that, I recommend all. The next option on here is to enable search subdirectories. So on my USB drive, if I had have had other folders added on there like /PS4/game/FPS and put a bunch of PKGs in there, it wouldn't have found them. Now, I typically like to put all of my PKGs on the root of my USB drive for installing in this manner, so I don't recommend putting that on. But again, that option's up to you. Now, this next option, I absolutely think that you should turn it on. And basically what this does is this prevents that kind of modal pop-up when you're installing PKGs. So I would go ahead and just turn that on. Or the next option here is called Show Package Info. I absolutely believe that you should have this one turned on. And the reason that I think so is that if you come back up here to Package Installer, you can see you've got a couple of PKGs here, but if we turn on Show Package Info and then go back to Package Installer, then I get just a little bit more information. So there is this option to show package path. Well, since we are going to use a package source of all, it makes a ton of sense for us to obviously put a check mark on that to show the package path. So what that means is that you can see this is in the mount USB 0. The next option that I would recommend that you enable is the debug settings. So by default, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you do not have debug settings on there. But if you come back in here and you go to enable debug settings, which there's these two kind of mini menu where it doesn't include everything or the full menu, I would obviously recommend you putting on full menu. And the reason that I say that is that you can obviously do all kinds of very neat things inside of debug settings. So like one example of that is that I could come down here to license activation, and well, this PS4 has never been activated to use MPEG-2. I could just come right in here, and now I could just activate all those settings, and well, if I didn't turn that setting on in Goldhin, well, then I wouldn't have been able to have made those changes. The next one is enable game debug settings. I do not recommend to add this on there, especially if you're just a regular, user of the jailbreak. I think a lot of this is a lot more for the developer, so I do not recommend it. Okay, so the next one right here is called cheat settings. So by default, this was checked, and that is great because we do want cheats to be enabled. And we will just leave the combo here as the long press share button, and we'll leave that one checked as well. And then on the last one here for the show title ID, we're going to change that to title ID and app version. And what do we get by doing that? Well, if we come right here, now we can see full information such as the app name, and then it has the version number located on it. And just so you are able to see a sample of this option here, which is show cheat menu on game options. If I have a game like I have right now that's already running, by putting a check mark on that, you basically get this right here, which is the Gold Hen cheat menu. Now, since I've got a game running, let me show you that not all options of Gold Hen are actually accessible when a game is running. So if I went down here to a plugin, which this is where you would do things like turn on 60 frames per second, patches for Bloodborne, etc., you'll notice that you can't do it. And now it does state that, hey, you can't change this value if a game is running. So we would obviously need to come in here and close the application. And now we can go back to the plugin settings. And so my recommendation for this one right here is that, yes, this is absolutely great if you're planning on running like some of those 60 frames per second patches or no intro skips, etc. And so we will put a check mark in there. And then the next one is the game patch plugin. So again, there's a number of these. Another example is the one that lets you skip the intros. I believe Uncharted 4 had support for that. But this, I would go ahead and just go ahead and tick that one on as well. Now, I will say if you ever have any sort of problems with games or you see anything that looks out of the ordinary, you can always just come back here and then uncheck that in order to try it with maybe that setting turned back off. And it looks like we're good here for our plugin settings. And then we've got game overlay. So I typically love to have the frames per second counter on. And so you will need to enable the counter, and then you need to show the counter. Is that if I went ahead and I went into maybe even a homebrew application here over on the bottom left hand side, I now have the frames per second that application is running in. So it's just a pretty handy sort of feature. Now, the other one here is for system information. So we can obviously turn this on and you can see there's a variety of different things. And let's just go ahead and let's go back and let's launch an application again. We can see we have a ton of additional information. But in my opinion, that is a bit too much information. So my recommendation for that is going to be to turn that off. Now, there are still some options here as far as the overlay that goes. There is the text position. I prefer the left. This is totally up to you. The text color, I also like for that to be white. It feels like it's very visible. Or enable scan lines. So this enables that kind of old school retro scan lines in your games. It's absolutely not for me. I love my retro consoles, but I play the actual like PS2 itself on old monitors that I have. So I like that type of experience. So I don't recommend turning that on. Now, if you do turn it on, you can see that there is an opacity level that you can play with here, and it goes all the way up to number 5. But my recommendation is to just turn that off. Okay, it looks like we're done with game overlay. Let's go into the server settings. So the very first one is to enable the FTP server. Okay, so if we go ahead and turn that on, then in just a moment, we will get a pop-up that's going to tell our IP address as well as the port number. So we can see right there, this one is listening. So if you use a client such as FileZilla, you can put in the IP address, no username, no password, and then port 2121. Press Quick Connect here, and this is your PS4's hard disk drive. You can absolutely navigate into these folders, and you're also able to do things such as read and write. The next one here is going to be turning on the bin loader server. So we're going to put a check in that one because we're also going to want to be able to send payloads over to this machine. Now, for the sake of this video, I won't go into it, but there's really 2 ways you can do it. There is a website right now by Chameleon that will let you test some of these payloads, or otherwise you can use one of these tools like Netcat GUI in order to send a payload. The next one is the clog settings. So this says enable TTY redirect. So this is typically for developers to get some diagnostic information. For the end user, I absolutely do not recommend that you keep this one checked. So we'll go ahead and we'll go to the next option, which is just the settings. So by default, enable rest mode support is already checked. I would go ahead and leave it checked, but if you do start to see some problems that you're having, maybe even coming out of rest mode, you can always come in and uncheck it. But anyway, I do recommend that you keep that checked. And then that is pretty much it. Now, one thing that's kind of cool in here is that if you go to the About page right here and you scroll down a little bit, you can get this kind of old school crack tro of Sistro. This is kind of a neat kind of little Easter egg that you can definitely go and check out. Okay, and so before we finish up with this section, you may be wondering, where do you get all of those cheats at in order to run in your game or your plugins? Well, it's very simple. If you head over to pkgzone.com, then you'll find Goldhen's Cheat Manager. And then go to Update, and then go to Update Cheats, Patches, and Plugins from the internet. And we're just going to do them one by one. So we're going to update the cheats, and now it extracts them. And now I can see I've got an up-to-date database that just came out a couple of days ago. Let's do the same thing for our patches. Here we go. We've got another very fresh set of patches. And then we'll just go ahead and update the plugins from GitHub as well. And there we go. Now we've got 11 plugins installed. And so that is all of the settings. Now there is one or two quick tips that I can give you. Obviously, you can now use the Goldhen menu option right here to just jump straight over into Goldhen. And then if you're wondering where the configuration file lies for this, if you use a tool like PS4 Explorer 2.0, which just came out for 11.0, and you go into root access and you go into data, you'll see that there is the Goldhen. And then if you scroll down to the config.ini, you can see here is all of those options that we were just setting through the menu. So you can obviously make a backup of this file right here. And then if you wanted to revert back to the settings that you prefer, you can easily do that. Now, if you delete this configuration.ini file, that is okay. Goldhen rebuilds it upon very first launch. So anyway, I hope that you got at least something out of this for your time that you've invested in it. If you like my content, all I ask of you is to subscribe to my channel. It is greatly appreciated. And also share videos if you find that they're helpful to you. Anyway, thank you so very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Michael out.